Welcome, everyone. We are back here for another study. Today, we will be in Colossians chapter 3. We're going to be looking at just verse 15. I think I've covered a section of these verses already, but we're going to zero in on 15 today. Colossians 3:15. Get your Bibles out, get them out in front of you. Open up to Colossians 3, verse 15. Give you a second there. All right, we're ready. Paul's talking to the church at Colossae here in this letter, just as a little background. This letter to the Colossians also gets read to the Laodicean church, which is interesting because if you go into Revelation chapter 2 and 3, where it goes back and forth to the churches, hey, you're lukewarm, I wish you were hot or cold, all those, Laodicea is in there. And so you get clues from why that letter in Revelation is worded the way it is to them by what we see here. Because this was before and that was after. So it kind of gives you the seeds of what was growing. And then by the time John writes the Revelation, these are the letter out to that Laodicean church. And we can look at it and go, oh, that correlates back to, and we're not going to do that tonight here with this. But I just wanted you to know that because I think that's pretty cool when things all click together. It makes it easier to understand, certainly makes it easier to remember when you can say, I'm here, hey, that connects with here. Because you know, that other place that connects here, well, that connects over here. And that one over there connects over here, which I think, again, is really cool. But that's the Bible nerd in me, so. Paul's talking to the Colossian church, and he's been talking to the church saying all kinds of different things. I mean, right before verse 15, verse 14, above all these, put on love. Love is the perfect tie to bind those together. And so he's talking to the church. He's telling the church, focus in on this. Look through this lens. And so in that light, here we are at verse 15 of Colossians chapter 3. Let your hearts fall under the rule of the anointed's peace, the peace you were called to as one body, and be thankful. If you just look at that in isolation, you might go this way or that way. But I've told you that this is a series, and this is just one line of a speech that he's giving here, writes out to the Colossian church, which, remember, is also read in the Laodicean church. And so, for us, yes, I want to know. Yes, you want to know. What were the Colossians thinking when they read that letter? What was Paul thinking when he wrote it? How was it received? And some of these things, we weren't there. But if we don't ask those questions, then we just gotta gloss over the top. It's like looking at a mountain range and all you see is the tops and you go, oh, that's pretty. But if you're up here and you get this whole view, now you can see the valleys, which pronounce the mountains even more. And that's kind of what we're doing here. We're going to zoom in here, but understand there's a larger picture. And that larger picture is pretty cool too. Let your hearts fall under the rule of the anointed's peace. As you look at that, what is happening here is we're being told, Paul says, we're all human. We know that. We got flesh and we bleed and we cry and we laugh, we love. But to be Christ followers, Paul says, think about these things here because they form our actions, they form our attitudes, They form the culture of the church. Yes, the church has a culture. And so as you come to 15 then, thinking about all those pieces, let your hearts fall under the rule of the anointed's peace. What's the deal with that? What do you think about that, and I wonder what that is. This is in part what this is about. Our hearts. God says in his word, the heart is deceitfully wicked above all things. And so as you read what it is to be a Christ follower, and you read about this is what a Christ follower does, this is what some of the things that a Christ follower has said, this is the things we should testify to, we should witness, we should proclaim ourselves. But here, let your hearts fall under the rule of the anointed's peace. We're submitting to our peace. It's the Lord's peace, but it's the peace he intends for his church. And as you look at that, what Paul is stating and recognizing right out front, and everybody reading this would know this part of it. I'm not saying this is everything, because this is rich. I mean, it's deep. But we're going to be right here. This is one thing, one little thing we're going to pluck out so that we can use it this coming week and form our thoughts, our behaviors, our speech to be more Christ-like, to be the church as Christ intended. And when we see this here, and I know I keep coming back to the verse because that's what we do not do as Christians. We read it. Some pastor or teacher, this is what's going on, da, 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 and they keep driving on. And that's not every single one, but in general in the American church, that's how things go. And if you differ on that, you probably haven't been in the church very long, or you're not in it at all. Because that is how it is. We like our culture. We try to homogenize it all. Same. And so that we just got this nice flowing, nice even. But the adventure, the journey that God has us on has ups and downs. We have to crawl up these mountains. Sometimes we need help. Sometimes we roll down the mountains. Now we really need help. But here in this verse, but above all these, put on love. Yep. And as we come here, that's all those verses before are framing us for this. I am going to let my heart fall underneath the rule of the anointed's peace. And it's the peace that he intends for his church. It is very, very similar in meaning and intention as in the Old Testament, the word shalom. And shalom, like this piece here, does not mean the absence of conflict. That's conformity, but that's not real peace. And people have said, oh, look, like the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. We'll kill you or you obey. Wow, that's a good peace. Everybody's following the rules because nobody wants to die. That's not what God's doing here. We need to think about this because in our nature, we are going to think, well, yeah, like the verse before, put on love. Yeah, this is what I think about that. And then I've got to humble myself. Well, in humbling ourselves, putting our heart underneath the peace of Christ here, what we do as humans, and I'm talking in generalities, the human race, we do this without fail. We see those things and we go, I'm loving like Jesus because it says right here, put on love. I do that. I put it on. I understand this and I'll tell you so you're not so ignorant. That is our predilection, our tendency to go that way. But Paul writes here to the Colossians and says, but over all this, let your hearts fall underneath the rule of the anointed's peace. Don't go shooting your mouth off. Don't go trying to be above everybody, because that is not within the anointed's peace. It's not the absence of conflict, because conflict, as long as there's humans, there's going to be conflict. Even in God's church, conflict is not always bad. Sometimes things need to be discussed because our minds just work better when we're tumbling the things, and we can see it better. We keep rolling it over, we see it better. So as we come to this, we're letting our hearts fall underneath the rule of the anointed's peace. We're saying, hey, this is the peace of the church. I want this. Christ wants this. I'm not just obeying Christ because he says so. Christ wants us to understand why. What's the importance of the peace? And that's what we're looking at here. What's the importance? As we let our hearts fall underneath the rule of the anointed's peace, we know in our minds, this is the peace we're talking about, is the peace you were called to as one body, not 50,000 bodies, one body. So that if you're in Jerusalem and you're a Christian and you went all the way to Spain, like we think Paul did, and he meets Christians, they unite. I mean, when you meet somebody, you don't even have to speak the same language. And you can feel the Holy Spirit drawing you together if you're letting your hearts fall underneath the rule of the anointed's peace. This is why this is so important, because when we say, okay, I don't need to be the chief. I'm going to follow God, because we all know what happened. The Israelites said, we want a king. God says, you don't need one. You don't need some human king. You got me. I'm way better than any human king. No. No, Billy's got a king over here, and Joey, he's got one over there. We want to be like them. All right, you can be like them, but this is what it's going to cost. And so, since we have all these examples, let's not pay that cost, because we don't have to. It's not obligatory for us to have to pay cost for this. Understand that this peace is what we were called to as one body. And then this little caveat on the end of verse 15, and be thankful. Because if I get arrogant, I'm not thankful, I'm critical. But if I'm thankful, I may see things that I wouldn't have otherwise seen. Not that God, oh, you're special, so God gives you this magic fling and now you understand everything. That's not what I'm saying. But if we're letting our hearts fall underneath the rule of the anointed's peace, and we insist on ourselves, no, I'm going to be thankful because I have tons to be thankful for. What that does for us, what that's going to do for us this coming week, you're going to look for ways. Lord, I want to see this. I am following underneath the rule of your peace. And you're telling me this is the peace that we were called to as one body. Got it. And so help me see more. Because when I see that more, I think you're telling me I'm going to be real thankful for that. I'm going to see these connections that I didn't otherwise see. This week, you're going to get opportunities to grow that for yourself. And like I always say, this coming week, God's going to put somebody, maybe a bunch of somebodies in your path so that you can help them be thankful and see why there's any benefit at all to falling underneath the authority of the Lord's peace. It's a big assignment, but we're up to it. And I will see you next week.